In the rich, polished streets of Santon, Johannesburg, 26-year-old Naledi Okonkwo sat at the long mahogany dining table inside her parents' beautiful home. The chandelier above her sparkled. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Expensive perfume mixed with the smell of roasted lamb and fresh bread. Her father's business guests were dressed in suits and silk dresses, laughing loudly like everything in the world was perfect. Naledi looked perfect too. Calm face, elegant black dress, straight posture. But inside her chest felt tight. Every laugh around the table sounded louder than it should. Every glance felt heavier. Then it happened. Her mother, Chioma Okonkwo, gently tapped her glass to get attention. With a sweet smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she said, "You all know our Naledi. Still trying to figure life out." A few guests chuckled politely. Chioma continued, "Always chasing big dreams instead of choosing something stable. But we're still praying for her." The table burst into light laughter. Naledi forced a small smile. She even nodded slightly, pretending it was funny. But her fingers tightened under the table. The words weren't new. She had heard them for years. Unrealistic. Impractical. Too ambitious. Tonight, though, it felt different. It felt intentional. Across the table, her brother smirked. One guest whispered something and shook his head. Naledi's heart pounded faster, but she stayed quiet. She always stayed quiet. But something inside her shifted at that very moment. This dinner wasn't just another family joke. It was the night everything began to change. This wasn't new for Naledi. It had been happening for as long as she could remember. Ever since she was a little girl, she had been compared to someone else. First, it was her older brother, Tendai, the brilliant one. The one who got perfect grades. The one who studied finance. The one who became the successful banker. At every family gathering, someone would say, "Why can't you be more like Tendai?" And everyone would nod like it was normal. Then there was her younger cousin, Amara, the future doctor. Amara was focused, serious, always talking about medical school. The aunties loved her. "Such a smart girl," they would say loudly, making sure Naledi could hear. "She knows what she wants." Naledi knew what she wanted too. He just wanted something different. While Tendai memorized numbers and Amara memorized biology terms, Naledi stayed up late teaching herself how to code. She watched free online tech tutorials. She sketched app ideas in old notebooks. She talked about startups and innovation and building something that could change lives. But every time she tried to explain her vision at the dinner table, the reactions were always the same. Confused faces, forced smiles, small laughs. "Tech business," her mother would say. "That's not stable." "Startups fail," her father would add calmly. "Be realistic." When one of Naledi's early projects didn't work out, her mother didn't comfort her. She simply sighed and said, "This is why I worry about you. You are too impractical." Impractical. That word followed her everywhere. Every family dinner started to feel like a stage. Tendai would talk about promotions and bonuses. Amara would talk about exams and scholarships. And when it was Naledi's turn, there was always a pause. Like the audience was waiting for the joke. She learned to smile through it. To laugh at herself before anyone else could. To say, "Yeah, I'm still figuring it out," even when she was working harder than all of them. But tonight felt different. Tonight, her mother's tone wasn't just teasing. It felt sharper. Intentional. Like she wasn't just joking. She was reminding everyone who the disappointment was. And for the first time, Naledi didn't just feel embarrassed. She felt done. What nobody sitting at that long dining table knew was that Naledi had not been figuring life out. She had been building something quietly, something real, something powerful. For the past 2 years she had been living in Nairobi, working with a small tech incubator that most people had never even heard of. While her family assumed she was just experimenting and wasting time, she was waking up at 5 a.m., taking crowded buses and spending 12-hour days developing her platform. She rented a tiny one-room apartment with peeling paint and a noisy generator outside. Some months she had to choose between paying for better internet or buying proper groceries. She chose the internet. There were nights she cried quietly, staring at her laptop screen after another investor said no. Too risky. Too early. Come back when you have traction. He heard it all. Some investors didn't even look at her co-founder. They looked at her and asked, "Who handles the technical side?" Assuming she couldn't possibly be the brain behind it. She smiled politely every time and kept explaining her vision again and again. She faced subtle sexism in meeting rooms filled with older men who talked over her. She pitched her idea more than 30 times. 30 rejections. Each one hurt. Each one made her question herself. But quitting would have proven her mother right, and she refused to let that happen. Money was always tight. She stopped buying new clothes. She skipped holidays. She avoided family gatherings because she didn't want to answer questions she couldn't yet answer. "How is your little project going?" they would ask. He hated that word, little. So she stopped explaining. She decided she would only speak when she had proof. Not small progress. Not promises. Proof. 2 days ago, after months of negotiations, late-night calls and endless revisions, a major venture capital firm approved a $5 million investment in her company. When she saw the signed document, her hands literally shook. She didn't scream. She didn't post it online. She just sat there in silence, letting it sink in. And tonight, as her mother joked about her big dreams, that signed contract was sitting quietly inside her handbag. Heavy. Waiting. By the time dessert was served, the air in the room felt heavier. The house staff placed small plates of chocolate cake and vanilla cream in front of each guest. Spoons clinked softly against fine china. The conversation had moved on to business deals and travel plans, but Naledi could still feel the earlier laughter sitting on her shoulders. Then her mother laughed again. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was casual, almost playful. But it cut deeper than before. "Maybe one day Naledi will surprise us," Chioma said, smiling as she stirred her tea. "Or maybe she'll just move back home permanently. We always have her old room ready." The table exploded with laughter again. This time it wasn't polite. It was comfortable, confident. Like everyone had accepted the joke. Naledi felt the heat rise to her face. Her ears started ringing. She kept her eyes on her plate, pretending to adjust her fork. Across from her, Tendai smirked and took a slow sip of his drink, clearly entertained. One of her father's business partners leaned toward another guest and whispered something. They both chuckled. A few people looked uncomfortable. One woman gave Naledi a soft, sympathetic smile. But no one spoke up. That hurt more. Her heart started beating faster and faster. She could feel it in her chest, in her throat, even in her fingertips. For years she had trained herself to stay quiet, to be the good daughter, to laugh along, to swallow the embarrassment and deal with it later in private. He could do it again. She could smile, finish her dessert, go home and cry alone like she used to. Or she could finally speak. Her handbag rested beside her chair. Inside it was the document that could silence every whisper in this room. The answer. Her fingers slowly tightened around the edge of the table. The laughter continued, but it started to sound distant now, like background noise. No one at that table realized that the power they felt, the power to mock, to judge, to compare, was about to disappear. This wasn't just another family dinner anymore. This was the moment everything was about to change forever. Naledi didn't even remember making the decision to stand. Her body just moved. The chair scraped softly against the marble floor, and the sound alone was enough to quiet a few people. Slowly she stood up at the end of the table. Her hands felt cold, but her eyes were steady. For a second no one understood what was happening. She looked at her mother first. "You're right, Mom," she said calmly. Her voice shook a little in the beginning, but she didn't stop. "I have been chasing something risky." The room went completely silent. Even the soft background music from the speakers suddenly felt too loud. Chioma blinked, surprised. She wasn't expecting a response, especially not a public one. Naledi took a slow breath. She bent down slightly and picked up her handbag from beside her chair. You could hear the light rustling of leather as she opened it. Every pair of eyes at the table followed her hands. From inside she pulled out a single document. It wasn't thick. It wasn't dramatic. Just a few neatly stapled pages. She placed it gently on the table and turned it so everyone could see the top page. At the top was the bold logo of a well-known African venture capital firm based in Lagos. Some of her father's business guests immediately recognized the name. Their expressions changed. 2 days ago, Naledi continued, her voice stronger now. This firm approved a $5 million investment in my company. For a moment no one reacted. It was like the words needed time to settle in the air. 5 million, someone whispered. Naledi nodded slowly. My tech platform focuses on rural women entrepreneurs. We help them access funding, digital tools and markets they've never had before. We're launching in 3 countries next month. Tendai leaned forward, suddenly serious. Her father picked up the document and scanned it quickly. His eyebrows lifted. Naledi felt her heartbeat steady now. The fear was gone. In its place was calm. I didn't move back home, she added softly. I was building something. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't angry. She was just honest. The same room that laughed at her dreams minutes ago was now staring at her like they were seeing her for the first time. The laughter didn't slowly fade. It stopped instantly. Like someone had pressed pause on the entire room. Tendai leaned forward in his chair, his earlier smirk completely gone. His elbows rested on the table now, his eyes locked on the document. Chioma blinked again and again as if her mind was trying to catch up with what she had just heard. For the first time that night she had no expression ready. No clever comment. No soft laugh to cover the moment. Naledi gently pushed the document toward the center of the table so everyone could see it clearly. My company just secured its first international funding round, she said softly, but her voice carried across the entire room. It didn't shake anymore. It was steady, controlled, certain. We launch next month across Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa. You could hear someone's spoon drop against a plate. The same guests who were laughing minutes ago were now staring at her like she had just spoken another language. One of her father's business associates picked up the paper carefully and adjusted his glasses. His eyes widened slightly as he scanned the figures. 5 million, someone whispered under their breath, almost in disbelief. Naledi nodded once. The energy in the room shifted so fast it was almost visible. The playful, teasing atmosphere was gone. In its place was shock, respect, curiosity, a little bit of embarrassment. Her father cleared his throat quietly, suddenly very serious. Tendai sat back slowly, processing. The cousin who used to be called the future doctor stared at Naledi with wide eyes. A few guests began murmuring, not with laughter this time but with admiration. That's impressive. At her age. International launch? Naledi stood there calmly watching it all happen. Just minutes ago she was the family joke. Now she was the headline. And everyone in that room knew it. The room was still quiet, but Naledi could feel that everyone was waiting. Waiting to see if she would sit down now. Waiting to see if that was all she had to say. But she wasn't finished. She took a small breath and kept standing. I didn't tell anyone, she said slowly, looking around the table. Because I needed to prove something. Not to investors. Not to the world. But to myself. Her voice was calm now. Not emotional. Not angry. Just honest. For years, she continued, I was told I wasn't enough. Not practical enough. Not stable enough. Not serious enough. She gave a small smile, but there was no humor in it. I started believing it. No one interrupted her. She turned her eyes directly to her mother. Every time I failed, it felt like I was confirming what everyone already thought about me. That I was just the dreamer. The unrealistic one. Chioma swallowed but said nothing. Naledi's hands were no longer shaking. So I stopped talking about my plans. I stopped explaining my vision. I decided that the next time I spoke about my dream, it would be because it had already become real. She paused for a second, letting the silence breathe. But dreams aren't foolish, she said softly. They're just uncomfortable. They make people nervous because they don't look safe in the beginning. The words landed heavily in the room. No one laughed this time. This was never about proving you wrong, she added, still looking at her mother. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't crazy for believing I could build something big. There was no anger in her tone. That was what made it powerful. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't humiliating anyone back. She wasn't even raising her voice. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. And somehow that made the moment even stronger. For the first time in her life, Naledi wasn't defending her dreams. She was standing inside them. For the first time in a long time, Chioma had nothing to say. No clever joke. No soft sarcasm. No quick comment to take control of the room again. She just sat there staring at her daughter like she was seeing her properly for the first time. The confident smile she had worn all evening slowly faded. In its place was something unfamiliar. Realization. She wasn't looking at a reckless girl chasing random ideas anymore. She was looking at a disciplined, resilient woman who had quietly fought battles no one in this house even knew about. Around the table the energy completely shifted. One of the guests shook his head in admiration. That's impressive, he said openly now. Another added, $5 million at 26? That's not luck. That's strategy. The whispers were no longer jokes. They were praise. Tendai, who had once enjoyed the teasing, suddenly found his glass very interesting. He avoided eye contact with Naledi. The earlier smirk was gone. The room that once felt like a courtroom, where Naledi was always on trial, now felt like a stage of redemption. Even the body language changed. People were leaning toward her, not away from her. listening not judging. Chioma finally spoke, but her voice was quieter than anyone had ever heard it. You did this, alone? It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't criticism. It was disbelief. Naledi looked at her mother steadily and nodded once. Yes, she said simply. Then she added, because I had to. Those 4 words carried years of silent pain. Years of feeling unsupported. Years of learning to depend on herself. Chioma's eyes softened. For the first time she understood that her daughter's silence wasn't failure. It was protection. It was strength growing in private. The power at that table had shifted, but Naledi wasn't using it to embarrass anyone. She wasn't smiling in victory. She was calm, grounded, and that made the moment even bigger. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about respect finally finding its way home. Naledi didn't smile in triumph. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't point out who had been wrong or make anyone feel small. That was the difference between insecurity and real confidence. The ability to stand tall without knocking anyone down. She straightened her shoulders and looked around the room, letting the silence settle. I don't need to be compared anymore, she said, her voice calm but firm. I just need to be respected. The words were simple, short, but they hit harder than any argument or heated response ever could. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong for the sake of it. It was about reclaiming her story, her life, her achievements, her choices. Even the people who had laughed earlier were quiet now. Some looked embarrassed. Some looked impressed. A few of the guests whispered quietly to each other, exchanging glances they hadn't shared before. Respect had replaced mockery. Naledi glanced toward the doorway. The servants standing nearby, who had silently observed every dinner drama over the years, smiled softly. They could feel the shift too. Something in that room had changed forever. History was being rewritten right before their eyes. Tendai, usually so quick with sarcastic remarks, didn't say a word. Even Chioma's lips pressed together, a small hint that she was processing everything. For the first time, Naledi didn't feel small and the room didn't feel like a courtroom. It felt like a space where truth had finally been acknowledged. She let the moment breathe. She didn't need to fill it with drama or emotion. Her calmness spoke louder than any argument could. This was power redefined, the kind that didn't shout, didn't brag, didn't humiliate. It simply existed. Naledi's eyes drifted toward the city lights outside the window. Santon's skyline glowed, elegant and steady, like her own resolve. She had finally proven something, not to the world or even her family but to herself. And that proof didn't need applause. The room had been a stage for judgment for so many years, but tonight, it had become a stage for respect, for acknowledgement, for clarity. And Naledi was standing at the center of it all, quietly owning it. For her, this was the real victory. Calm, confident, unshakable. As the dinner finally ended, Naledi walked slowly toward the balcony. The doors opened to the cool night air, and she could see Santon's skyline glowing like a river of lights stretching into the distance. The city felt alive, buzzing with possibilities, just like her own mind. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message from her Nairobi team popped up. We did it. Congratulations. The deal is official. She smiled softly, feeling a rush of relief and pride all at once. 2 years of hard work, late nights, and quiet sacrifices had finally paid off. For a moment she just stood there looking out at the city. The laughter from the dinner, the mocking, the doubts, the comparisons, seemed distant now, almost like it had belonged to someone else. That laughter, which had once made her feel small, had actually built her strength. Every sneer, every whisper, every tiny judgment had shaped her into someone who could stand tall and own her truth. She remembered her mother's words, Tendai's smirk, the polite chuckles of the guests. All of it had been fuel. And now here she was, proof in hand, life in motion, dreams turning real. Naledi took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The cool air filled her lungs and with it, a sense of calm and certainty. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need to shout or fight. She had done it. She typed a quick reply to her team and then looked up at the stars above the city. In that quiet moment, she whispered to herself, the words carrying more weight than any applause ever could. They laughed at my dreams, until my truth made their laughter disappear. And for the first time it felt like her life was truly hers.